Welcome to another episode of Bring Out Your Undead. I'm Megan, and I have reanimated both Casey and Pepperina to continue our multi-part conversation on vampires in D&D 5th edition. This episode is called Vampires, Part 2, In Strahd We Trust.
Amen.
So see we all.
In this episode, we'll be zooming in on one of the most popular and dangerous bad guys in all of Dungeons & Dragons, Strahd von Zarovich.
Before we get to the good stuff, let's take a few minutes to discuss our personal experiences playing Curse of Strahd, because we've all played in that campaign separately, and Peps, it's time for you to finally get the nasty details out about the erotic adventures of Ravenloft.
Does anybody know how many times we can say orgy on this?
I looked it up. Disney said 2.
Okay. I just used one. Fuck.
Do we want to roll, or do we want to... Okay,
should I hold my action?
I was going to say,
go last?
Casey and I will roll, okay?
Yeah.
9.
Natural 20. I think that's like the first time in the most insignificant means of rolling.
I love that for you.
All right. Yes, I got to experience Strahd in the classic means of going to Barovia and attempting to, not become a bride and save, various people. And it came to some epic yet tragic yet hilarious ends, with the encounter ultimately happening in a closed space and Strahd rolling really, really poorly, and us being able to catch him in sunlight in his misted form. And so ultimately it was an epic fail roll while he was invisible, I think, and in an attack. And while he was trying to flee, we destroyed him in a rapid and hilarious fashion. So we didn't get a huge opportunity to negotiate or talk with him before that. It was a few random encounters that we were able to get out of. And then ultimately this thing popped off and we killed him based on some really poor rolls on the DM part and some really great rolls on our part. And that's my experience playing Curse of Strahd.
Amazing. Yeah, my experience wasn't a traditional Strahd in terms of we didn't interact with Strahd and or any of the until the very, very end. It was the true big bad that we didn't actually have any interaction with until the end, kind of thing. But this was the campaign that I played in immediately after having a horrible experience with my DM. So I wanted to play the least romantic character on the planet. So this was the campaign that I built the tiny dwarf bard, basically built after Rainbow Bright, that wanted to bring cheer and happiness to everybody. And she joined a party of really sad, brooding, sad folk. So it was she was just a little starshine that just wanted everybody to be happy. And she made best friends with the turtle, where they actually made beaded friendship bracelets and traded them. It was just the cutest thing on the planet. But then when it came to killing actually Strahd, it was my character that did the final stake to the heart. But we were tracking ammo and that kind of stuff, and I had a crossbow, but we were basically in the tomb, and we had cracked open the casket, and then I took a piece of the casket and loaded it into my crossbow and shot it into him, and that was how we ended up killing Strahd in my campaign. But it was really cool because my character, who was trying to be the star sign shun sign, was the one that ended up killing Strahd in the end. But there was no romanticism, there was no trying to be his wife. There was none of that stuff that Pepperina is going to go over today. So my experience was very different from everybody else's. So, yeah. But
right. So I've actually played in Strahd a couple of times. I think I've been in Barovia at least 4 times with different characters. However, the most iconic one that people remember me for is when I streamed with the All Natural 20s, and it was most of our first time ever playing D&D, and it was an all girls group except for the DM, and we immediately just all decided we were going to marry this man. That was a collective, yes, we will become sister wives by the end of this. Except for one. There was one girl who did not, she played her character and was like, I'm not into, like, we're gonna defeat him. And we're like, sure, okay. So he would do things like one of the characters was like had a lost sister that she was looking for, and like he sent us a finger in a box that was very clearly her sister's finger, and we were like, that is so romantic.
Yeah.
He's sending us gifts.
Ew.
And we like wrote him back a love letter in our blood and all signed it, just thanking him for this pretty gift that he sent us. And it was this was a campaign we rolled for dick size.
Right.
And got a nat 20.
Of course. What's his wingspan, ladies and gentlemen?
The best nat 20 of my life was that one. And then we got to the end and got to his castle. There was an orgy on the way to his castle with the guys that picked us up. One of my weapons was a double-sided dildo. Another girl had a cape that had like things that like pictures on it that would come out. One of them was a vibrator. It was very yeah.
Very special kind of table.
It was a very special kind of table. And yeah, previously we had been stuck at, it wasn't the death house, it was a second haunted house. And I remember we went into a room and there was a bearskin rug, and immediately by this point we knew everything was coming to life, and so I just stabbed it in the head immediately, and I was like, I'm not fucking around with this, and killed it. Like it was supposed to come alive and eat us, and then we just had an orgy on it instead.
I love that like we are recording this now and not when we had originally planned, because Casey and I are now in almost like a Strahd situation, because we are in a castle, right? We're not playing in Strahd, but Adam is of course pulling from his like so this is the first time Casey and I played in a game together that is vampire-esque.
Yeah.
And, it is getting a little bit horny, but my character like, so it's Strahd, Cass, and Vecna in one castle right now. And we're like immediately everybody was like, they know Adam knows his audience because we're super and we just had literally our last episode was us having a ball where he danced around and we're like trying to be they were trying to seduce both of us to do one thing or another. My character though is just contingent on power, so she's like, yeah, like I'll become your person because I get your strength and your abilities. It's like swoon.
Swoon. So the way this ended, we went to his castle at the end, like you're supposed to. And we all were just like he tried to intimidate us, and we're like, no, we're getting married tonight. Except for the one that did not want to marry him. She got thrown into the jail. And so we, he turned us all. We had a fantastic evening in his bedroom. And then we woke up to sunlight coming in through the window and like starting to burn us all. And had discovered that he had like wandered off, and our one girl plus like Esmeralda and all the other people you're supposed to get on your team throughout the game had killed him in the middle of the night and were coming after us. And so we had this big battle, not with Strahd, but with everybody else that was supposed to be on our side, in a traditional game, plus one of our players. And it came down, we killed everybody except for that one player, and we charmed her and brought her over to our side and turned her, and then went down, and one of the girls had taken every one of the like dark curses from the Emerald or the Amber Temple, and among those was a resurrection. So we resurrected Strahd and turned him into our sex slave, and became the vampire queens of Barovia.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm like, what a great role playing that would be,
Yeah. And that is how I got the name Pepperina Sparklegem and this persona that we all know and love, because that is who I played in that campaign. It was a small gnome with blue hair and a peacock feather tiara and cheetah print armor.
Hey man, she loves
Name.
style. She has flair. She has grace.
Yeah. And her name was Pepperina Sparklegem.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure we'll get to hear a lot more throughout this episode about smaller people and their endeavors. So. All right, so to kick us off, I thought I'd start with the Cole's notes on vampires as a whole as they were discussed in last episode. So if you would like inspirations that are focused very mainly on the blood-sucking creatures, that is your first place to go. But just for a quick recappers for all of that, vampires, first and foremost, we discovered slightly more complex than we like to remember. So I'm going to be brief. I don't know if we remember, like it was a long time ago we recorded that episode, but I think we were all kind of like, I forgot how complex vampires.
Yeah, their stat block is an entire fucking page.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to be super brief and super simple. So they are shape-changing, blood suckers for life, misty escaping, children of the night. In fact, a sunburn will damage them greatly. They have a ton of fun lair actions, such as dead withering trees and fog, and can charm the shit out of you, along with their shape changing into bats and all of that fun shit. They are a whopping CR 13, so don't fuck around and find out. If you do find out, you will kill those bitches with radiant damage or holy water. It just stops their regen ability, basically. So that's the only way you can kind of whittle down their actual health is using those types of damage. But to actually kill them, you need to reduce to 0 hit points, which turns them into dust. But if they don't make it back to the resting place within 2 hours, that is when they will perish. So if you can remove or take away their space, they won't respawn. During last episode, we also reviewed the vampire spawns. These are usually the turned victims of the proper vampire. They are only a CR 5, have all the same vampire weaknesses, such as not being able to enter a home without being invited, hate running water and sunlight. But most of all, a stake to the heart while in their resting place will kill them instead of just paralyzing them, which is the big difference. Like if you stab Strahd in the heart in his coffin, he's just paralyzed. Whereas if you stabbed a spawn in the heart in their coffin, they will die.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, we tapped into the Icewind Dale variants, which were even lower around a CR 3 and didn't have much to add. They were just a little bit more themed and a hell of a lot easier to kill. But yeah, so I believe Casey's going to take us through a few more variants that we might be able to see.
Yes, the monster manual describes 2 vampire variants, the first being the vampire spellcasters. So this increases the challenge rating from 13 to 15. And these are 9th level spellcasters using intelligence. They have a spell save DC of 16 and a +8 to hit on spell attacks. They draw from the wizard's spell list and have a total of 14 spell slots across levels 1 to 5. So just covering what those spells are. For cantrips, they have Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, and Ray of Frost. For level 1, Comprehend Languages, Fog Cloud, and Sleep. 2 is Detect Thoughts, Gust of Wind, Mirror Image. Level 3 is Animate Dead, Bestow Cursed, Non-Detection. 4th is Blight and Greater Invisibility. And 5th, finally, is Dominate Person. So this absolutely levels up the vampire in a very specific way. And I think it's very useful and unique as an option to use, especially if you're doing a very undead focused campaign. Additionally, we have the vampire warrior. This is also in the monster manual, and essentially it's much more simple in that it's a vampire that wears plate armor and wields a greatsword. So the vampire warrior has a CR of 15, which is the same as the spellcasters, but it has an AC of 18 due to that armor, and it gains multi-attack for 2 greatsword attacks. The greatsword has +9 to hit, a 5-foot reach on 1 creature, and deals 2d6 +4 slashing damage on a hit. Again, a useful variant, I think, if your undead campaign or your vampire situation is going really battle or war heavy. This is a great variant to throw in there that players might not know. That's the 2 variants that are added in the monster manual.
All right. Well, let's raise some dice and we will answer some fun questions.
I have my special super pokey dice to
Oh, those are cute. They look like little landmines. That's fun.
Yeah. The whole set is like Caltrap dice that have these very pokey little things, but I thought I'd break them out for Strahd.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
All right. I rolled a 5.
I rolled a 1 with the same dice that just rolled the 20. So here we are.
I also rolled a 5.
Amazing. Roll off.
Okay.
12.
7.
Amazing.
Okay.
All right. So the first question we always talk about is like the role-playing aspects of these ones. So this could be anything from plot hook, an adventure idea, some of the descriptions that might inspire you, or, you know, any kind of role-playing tip for these ones. So I feel like because with the spell ones especially, I find very interesting. Just because they have a little bit, like, they're interesting, but they also don't interest me because a lot of their spells are kind of match what comes with being a vampire. Like, almost to the degree that those abilities would be pointless. Like, I don't, like, so when you're looking at some of their spell lists, they have fog cloud. How exciting. They're usually surrounded by fog already. Sleep, great. They can probably charm you into falling asleep if they felt like it anyways. Like, you know, like, it's just kind of just like, I don't really understand like it's almost like they chose the spells to go with being a vampire, but also chose them too closely to be with a vampire. And then so for me, when I'm role playing with one of these as a DM, you would almost have to talk about the visuals of what it looks like when they're casting spells. Because if you're going in to fight a vampire and all of a sudden fog rolls in, you're like, okay, cool, it's just a regular vampire. Whereas if you described it, when you enter, all of a sudden you see them raise their hands and then fog comes like through their fingertips or comes billowing out of their cloak or something along those lines. Like, they have to be way more descriptive of what their spells are doing and how they're casting them to make you realize that it's different than fighting a regular vampire, if that makes sense. But other than that, I think that they would be a lot of fun to have in the campaign because it reminds me very much of, like, if you want to play a Twilight version of Strahd, you just make them a lot of spellcasters with cool, like, individual like abilities, and then you just you basically have sparkly vampires from Twilight. So you're welcome. I want to do a countdown of how long it takes me to reference Twilight in all of our vampire episodes, but there you go. I believe Peps, you're next.
Yeah. So I do really like these additions because vampires were once people. They would have different goals and motivations in their life that carries over into the, you know, their vampiric afterlife. So I think these give you the opportunity as a DM to add some extra personality and backstory to your big bad. So, like, if this person was a warrior in their life, then they would be a warrior vampire in their afterlife. Or if they were magic users, if they were a sorcerer or wizard or anything like that, then that would explain why they now have that magic. So it gives you the opportunity, like, you might think you're going after just a wizard, and you don't know by the time you've gotten there that they have been turned into a vampire and are now a spellcasting vampire.
Yeah. That's why I think that I would want to be able to customize what the spell list is and not use this grouping that they gave us, in terms of if I was to have a big bad person or have one of my wizard players turn into a vampire, I'm not going to take away their spell list and give them this one, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fair. I kind of like the idea of, it's absolutely helps backstory building and just bringing little, like, hints beforehand. And, like, I went down the road of, okay, when would these variants and this, like, more specialized abilities come up? And, like, for the spellcaster, of course, you think lich. Like, okay, if there's a powerful lich and starts, you know, bringing in more vampires, and it's like, okay, I want to beef some of these up, and then it makes sense with also the wizard spell list being chosen as the spell list. It's like they're trying to just add a couple more levels of power in their vampire horde that they might have. But looking at both variants, I also was thinking, okay, so what if you had a very famous, like, general of an army, or even like a king or something, who had their child was, like, supposed to, you know, grow up and, like, take over their responsibilities, and then in that world vampires came in and their child was turned, and they, like, absolutely can't accept that their child is only going to be this vampire and no longer can, like, fulfill this, like, destiny that they're supposed to be. And so then they start just training and giving their like child these abilities that they have. So if they were like a general, then it's like, no, I don't care. You are going to wear armor and you are going to learn to fight with a greatsword. And so then you get this vampire that's this actual warrior. And it's like this fight to hold on to something that's being torn from them. And similarly, if you have like a like sage or a wise wizard who has their like protege who like some series of very unfortunate events ends up becoming a vampire, and it's like, I can't let go of the last 20 years of work I've done with you. You are going to continue. And so they just morph them into this vampire spellcaster instead. So play on that.
This is how you create great evil.
Yeah.
Oh man, it just I know Adam's gonna be one that edits this episode and he's gonna try and cut that. I go, just cut this part out. But like in our campaign, Casey, like the fact that my character took deals from 2 vampires, I'm kind of hoping causes a problem.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever you want to say. Cool, I'll take your powers. I'm also gonna take this guy's powers too. Like,
yeah. And I love that it was like, okay, what do you want to do? I'm going to dance with Strahd. What are you going to do? I'm dancing with Kaz. And then it's like, okay. And it's like, okay,
Crazy.
You switch. So it's like, I'm dancing with all of them.
Yeah. But it was just my like in terms of like building myself to being a big bad evil guy, I'm pretty sure at some point is because I'm taking all of the vampire abilities that I can find from other vampires, as opposed to what you're saying, which is like you're trying to give them the most humanistic abilities, but you're also creating a monster at the same time.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So anyways, for next go, we're gonna talk about the exploration tips. So this could be anything from environmental interactions, which we all know that they have really fun layer actions just from being vampires as a whole. But then you can also talk about possibly any of the spells or anything to do with them as characters. Existential horror, dread, or body horror, which we tend to talk about also any of those areas. For me, I feel like I was good. If I'm going to have spell casting vampires, it's going to be cult related. Vampires already are cult related.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to take it to the 700th degree, though, in my mind. Like, they would be worshiping someone somewhere, whether it is Strahd, whether it is, like, there is a worship occurrence happening here. So this, with the exploration piece, would obviously be, there would be symbols that are indicative and representative of whatever cult they're from. You would have warnings that they are stronger than your regular vampire because they do have access to, like, arcanic energies and are able to use certain types of magic. You might have a paladin or a cleric in your group that knows about this cult that exists within the world, and is the one that's warning you and steering you guys away from it, right? Like if you go to a town that has that symbol on like one of the townsfolk or on one of the buildings, that paladin might be like, we can't stay here, right? Like, but that, or the cleric will say we can't stay here, and the paladin will be like, we have to save them. And then and like, this is not a mission, just everybody move on. But it would definitely be, and I think that it would be a representation of what type of magic they have. So like how I was speaking before, I would choose a different spell list than this one. I think that if I was going to do like a cult, it would be very specific. They use a certain type of magic, whether it's a deceptive type of magic or if it is a more destructive, like your fireball type of magic. I'm trying to think of the words for the different types of magic in D&D right now. For some reason, my brain just can't do it. Enchantment.
There's so many. There's so many.
The words in my brain are getting mixed up with like other video games.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
I get it.
But yeah, either enchantment magic or like conjuration magic or like the certain type would be that they are good at. And that's all you're going to be facing to make it. If you want to lower the CR in terms of like, you would know what type of magic you're coming into, or being able to research this cult helps you learn what type of magic they use. And that would be a good explorative thing of being like, okay, well, if we're going to face them, let's research them, send someone to, so your smart character goes to the library, learns everything about them. You find out they're good at conjuration magic, and then you find ways to combat that. Right? Like that would be a good build up to the big fight at the end, right?
Yeah. I would look at like the warrior version of this as being like the general of an army gets turned into a vampire and then turns his entire army into spawns. Yeah. And you just have like this whole army of vampires going through, and you would see that like destruction in the path. And I think this is where you would get like Vlad the Impaler kind of stuff, where there would just be heads on pikes outside of any village that they go through, before you know what you're coming up against. You would see this kind of like really horrific like display at each town as you go through, and it wouldn't just be like, oh, they burned the town down and moved on. Like it would be displayed out in this almost like horrifically artistic way, showing people what they are as you go.
Well, it'd be like an intimidation of strength, right? Like it would be like the different sized monsters they kill. Like you'll have its head on one pike, you'll have like a boar's head on another, or what have you, and like the biggest kill's head is like at the center or what have you, so you get like an depiction of the kind of strength that they have. That's cool.
Going on that too, they are variants, but they are still the vampire that has the ability to like move into bat form. So imagine like tactically for the warrior, they don't need to break down the door. Like imagine having a swarm of bats coming towards your like keep, and 1 second you're looking and it's a swarm of bats coming up and over the wall, and then the next you see within your keep a row of vampire warriors protecting a mass of vampire spellcasters, and then they are like moving up the stairwell towards like the main keep and the throne to destroy the king or queen or whoever. Like they don't have to march in just because they're the warrior. Like because I was thinking as you guys were talking, I was thinking, okay, like it could be cool to have that, like you wouldn't necessarily know that they're vampires. They would just look like army, like you know, humanoids in armor carrying great swords marching up and then, you know, trying to bash down the door to get in. But then I'm like, wait, they wouldn't have to do that. They could just fly in and then drop down and return back to their true form and then just like fuck shit up. So you got to keep all of those abilities in mind, and then how this actually levels that up is kind of terrifying and could really like change the outcome of the attack.
Yeah. Well, that's super cute. Cute. I'm gonna hate it, but yeah. No, especially like again to your point, leading into the shape changing thing. I think that's really cool because leading into the talking more about combat, because that kind of bleeds right into it. The kind of thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about how they can turn into bats and have the shape changing thing. I went into the other variants we talked about last time, like the kobold ones and like the gnoll ones, and I was like, if I was to have like a hierarchy structure of how this worked, there'd be like a Draco-Lich at the top somewhere. They would have like one warrior vampire variant and then one spellcaster variant. And then they have kobold spawns. And so, and how they protect the said dragon is that the kobold spawns are the ones running around doing most of the killing and the reaping and then the bringing folks in for murder and death. And then, but if you were going to go and fight this Draco-Lich to get rid of it, it's one warrior and one mage basically that you have to fight to get to it. But like, and then to add in like Pep's idea of the fact that like showing the strength in terms of like you would have heads on pikes. This would be like walking up to whatever cave or swamp that this thing lives in. That would be like riddled with these things, but it's actually like tiny kobolds that are doing this. So you'd be like, unbeknownst that a tiny kobold will take down a giant, right? It's like, well, it probably didn't, but 10 kobold vampire spawns probably did, right?
Yeah.
But like, I just feel like that would be a good like intro into it, because like you're not gonna want to fight any of these in their own hometown lair. Like you either try and draw it out or have a very, very good plan if you're going into it, like, because they'll know that you're there, right? Like it's just the whole vampire thing is that they know that you are around. So sneaking up on one is not the ideal. So, and I think that's why people who play Strahd just end up in a relationship with Strahd, is because the only way to get close to him is to like give him what he wants until you either turn your back on him and stab him in the heart, or succumb and then just make him a better person because you can fix him, you know?
Yeah.
So, but
we certainly fixed him.
See? What about you, Peps? Any other thoughts on combat?
I would look at how hard it would be to actually kill one of the magic ones, because their like crypt and where they return to would be so warded with magic that like to get back to that to destroy it, you would have to go through so many different like traps and wardings, and like you may have just killed them, but you're not actually going to kill them. until you destroy their place. So like what that would look like. Like you think, yay, we won. Oh fuck.
Yeah, that would be a tough one.
The after battle. Like you're already down. You've lost like most of your spell slots because you only have a certain amount of time to like go destroy them there.
Yeah. Well, think of the exploration piece to that would be great though, because like then you not only have to learn how to fight magic against these things so you can actually injure it and kill it, but now you have to learn enough about magic to be able to infiltrate their lair and be able to get in and learn what these symbols mean, like what language is it written in, and like learn all those things, right? So that's what a good piece to add into. Not only is the combat going to be hard, but your intelligent characters are going to have to put in a lot of work to figure out how to get through it. Right.
Yes.
So it's a good balance in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like once the battle's done, it's not done. It's not done.
Totally. And say you decide to split the party. And so one party goes to their resting place to try and infiltrate and destroy it while you have them like distracted and you're fighting them somewhere else. And then you do defeat them and you know that they're going back to their resting place. And you are just like, I really hope like they were able to do what they needed to do. And you get there and it looks like they got in, like they broke through the wards and they were able to penetrate the resting area. And then you get right in there and then you realize that there were some spellcasters there still, and your friends are now dominated because they used the dominate person. And they are just standing guard of those places. And so you see the mists were able to return to their resting place, or the bats or whatever. And now you are fighting your own characters because they're turned into like they're being dominated. And so now they're just acting as a defense.
What a fun way to do a TPK that turns into a one of those, like, you're now fighting your old characters. Like you go and fight them the first time and you get a group TPK, and then you're like, okay, well now we all roll new characters, we start again, we know a little bit more, like we're gonna be better, stronger characters, and then you go in and your old characters are the now guards of this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you have to flee and leave them behind because they're under the control of the vampires, and then you recoup and you come back, they have now been turned into like the vampire spellcaster or vampire warrior. And so now you're fighting them as that.
Ooh, and if you only had one character that like died, I would have them be like almost vengeful against the group that left them behind.
Totally.
I would have that conversation one-on-one in silence with, like, if I was a DM with that character, and be like, you're not dead. You're now having a conversation with this thing. And it's just like along the lines of, your friends left you behind. If you want great power, I can give it to you, but you will now serve me, and I will never abandon you, and I will never leave you behind. Right?
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So even if you go and you see them and you think that you're freeing them, they have mentally switched and said, no, I have a better life now, and you guys left behind, so fuck you. You could do that with your light and fluffy NPC if you wanted to, you know what I mean? So, but anyways. All right. Good. Any final thoughts on those fun variants?
Oh, I like them. I think they're good. They're good additions and give you the chance to like bulk out, your backstory and who your vampire was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're not going with one of the obvious Strahd or Cass,
build your own, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, Strahd is just the mage and Cass is just the warrior version. Like we're making that correlation right now, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It is nice to have an option for it to wield a weapon as well. Like you could interchange that greatsword with something that's relevant to a backstory or relevant to the world or realm or whatever too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Now it's time.
Almost.
We got one small section before
I let Pep pop off about Daddy.
Okay, fine.
We're going to get a little bit of context of the adventure itself, and what the lands and, where this mastermind lives. So, as mentioned, it is within the Curse of Strahd campaign manual. If you have not figured that out already, get good.
But should we have said spoiler alerts at the top of this?
I feel like it is intended that spoilers will be It's like, come on. But okay, spoilers alert. Okay. But anyways, I'm just gonna give a good like overview of what Ravenloft is, and that's all I'm really gonna do here. Very simple. And the easiest way to go about this descriptor is your players will land in a foggy area and land called Barovia. Anyone who has ever played a Strahd campaign or in D&D has probably heard this town's name. But this is where undead, ghosts, and werewolves run rampant, and most importantly, also our vampire friends. There are numerous desolate towns and closed-up shops. The air is always thick, and the fog is always rolling. Think haunted forest towns, and that is basically what you're going to get. All these towns are shadowed by the castle itself, Ravenloft, so Castle Ravenloft, and that sits on top of a rocky spire towering over the lands. In the evenings, you will often see swarms of bats leaving the castle windows for the evening to hunt, along with Strahd himself sometimes. The book does provide a number of kickoff starters for what brings your adventurers together. I love that they've started doing that in a lot of our D&D manual books, because sometimes that is the hardest thing to do as a DM, is find something more creative than you meet in a tavern. There is the classic, you meet in a tavern as strangers, and then a stranger hands them a letter inviting them to Barovia itself, to a very simple one that I like, which you can throw anywhere. You can literally throw that one in anything. I don't want to mind the old you meet in a tavern, right? But the one that even we used in ours, Casey, is the one that is very classic. You walk through a wall of fog and you are now in Barovia.
Yeah.
Like
you stumble out of your house. Yeah. You walk through fog. You're there.
We're in Barovia. So that is the most classic one most folks do. Like, again, Casey, we used it in ours with Adam. We ended up in Barovia.
Yeah.
By flying through fog. We were birds. We turned ourselves into pigeons.
Pigeons, yeah.
We turned ourselves into pigeons so we could fly and travel across more ground. And our punishment for that was you're in Barovia.
We got lost.
Yeah,
our navigation wasn't great.
I've gotten lost and found myself in Barovia so many times. So
that's your dream and your state of being. And with that, my lady, pop off.
Yeah. All right. I do, when I'm in other campaigns, have to remember that I am in love with Strahd, but not all of my characters are.
Oh my God. I had so much hard when went in our campaign, because Cass was in ours. And I knew my character would not love Cass. Yeah. I love Cass. Yes. So that's why when my agreement with Cass was all power based, it had nothing to do with my actual attraction to the cat, but it was so hard.
That's my best role playing, is not being in love with Strahd. All right. So from what I've seen, most editions have very similar tales of Strahd, with just slight details or motivations changing, because I believe he's like all the way to the back of, from the first edition. He's been in all or most of them. For 5e, it goes as this. Strahd von Zarovich was the eldest son of King Barov. Is it Barov or Barav? How do we say?
I've had it pronounced different ways.
Yeah, because I want to say Barov because Barovia.
Yeah. I don't know.
But okay, so, and Queen Ravenovia, with the younger brother Sergei. He held many titles in life that included Count, Prince, Soldier, and Conqueror. He fought many long and bloody wars after the death of his father, destroying every enemy his family had. The last battle was near a remote mountain valley, and after he won, he decided to stay and name it Barovia after his father. War had made him cold and arrogant, and this scared his mother, so she kept Sergei away from war and close to her. This made Strahd jealous that she did not show him the same affection. So in Barovia, he stayed. Now that he had defeated all of the enemies, he was starting to feel restless, like his best days were behind him. So he started to obsess over the idea of immortality, as to not have the same fate as his father. He studied magic and became a wizard, and eventually made a deal with the dark powers to live forever. He then commanded the wizards and artisans of his new conquered lands to build him a castle that would rival the magnificent fortress of his homeland. He named the castle Ravenloft to honor his mother and show her how much he loved her, then sent for her and Sergei to come join him at the castle. While Sergei made it to the castle Ravenloft, the queen died while traveling and never got to see her namesake. A young, beautiful woman named Tatiana soon caught Strahd's attention, and he became obsessed with her. She, however, fell for the younger, softer Sergei. His pride kept him from interfering with the young couple's love until their wedding day. Strahd became enraged and killed Sergei, drinking his blood and completing the pact he made with the dark powers. He then chased his love through the gardens, convinced he could make her love him. Distraught and terrified, Tatiana hurled herself from the balcony, plummeting to her death. Some of Strahd's guards took this as the perfect opportunity to rid themselves of their master and shot arrows upon him. This is the moment the dark powers honored their pact. The sky went black and Strahd's eyes went blazing red. The arrows did not kill him, for he was now a vampire. He quickly slaughtered the guards and then looked up at the sky to see the faces of his mother and father looking down on him, disappointed. Thus proving, even as an all-powerful vampire, nothing stings more than your parents being disappointed in you. Completing the Dark Pact also meant that all of Barovia would now be trapped in a demiplane surrounded by deadly fog that even Strahd cannot escape. Centuries have passed since that fateful day, and Strahd has taken many lovers in this time. In the role-playing tips, it says men and women of beauty and cunning catch Strahd's eye, and he uses them as playthings until he tires of them. He will turn them into vampire spawn, but none will fill his heart the way Tatiana did. He feeds on the poor souls of the Barovian people, but they give him very little fulfillment. From time to time, adventurers appear in the lands, and this is what Strahd lives for. He plays this cat and mouse game, toying with them as they make their way through the lands and uncover its dark secrets. Strahd does believe that if he finds someone worthy of leading the lands, then he will be freed. But he is also so arrogant that he cannot find anyone he believes is better than he is. He also believes that his love returns in different bodies over time. He has seen a woman in town named Irina he believes to be the soul of Tatiana. Now, as I mentioned, there are some differences to the story over the editions. Some deal with why Tatiana wouldn't love Strahd, not just that she fell for Sergei first, but that she was repulsed by Strahd and thought of him as old as the years of war had aged him so much, and this is why he became obsessed with immortality. In some, she arrives as Sergei's love first, and he immediately wants to take her as his own, trying to trick her into leaving Sergei. But in all, she meets the same cruel fate of having her love killed on their wedding day and falling to her death. 5e does not specify this in what I've read, but I did not read the entire book, so it may have come up. But most said he never found her body, and this is why he believes she comes back to him. Yeah, so that's the general backstory of Strahd. So now let's look a bit at what fighting him would be like. For those who do plan on fighting him, that is, and not marry him, which I think is the lesser of the two options, but
okay, there's other options out
we'll
there.
talk about it anyways. He has fought many wars and won them all, so he is very intelligent when it comes to fighting. There are a few facts you want to keep in mind when running an encounter against him. Strahd attacks at the most advantageous times and from the most advantageous positions. He knows when he is in over his head and will retreat if he begins to lose more hit points than he can regenerate, either staying out of range or flying away or using a summon wolves or bats. He will study the players and target those with the lowest wisdom scores to turn on their friends and using them to protect him against the party. If you are playing this game and have not turned one of the party members against the rest of the party, you're doing it wrong.
At least
as
one.
A DM. Yeah.
Even if it's your beloved NPC, you know?
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. Strahd can summon minions when not in his tomb or in the location specified by the card reading that takes place earlier in the game. There is a table to roll on to determine which minions show, if any, and these can be used to bust into residences the players are in, unless they are a vampire spawn, in which they would still need an invitation. Hidden deep in the castle Ravenloft is a giant crystal known as the Heart of Sorrow. Strahd is connected to this crystal, and it allows him to be bold in his actions. Any damage Strahd takes can be transferred to the crystal. The Heart of Sorrow has 50 hit points, and if its damage is reduced to 0, then it's destroyed. But it regains its hit points at dawn as long as 1 still remains. Strahd can use a bonus action to turn off the link when he wants and another to reestablish it on his next turn. The effect of this can be quite chilling to witness. An example from the book is the damage dealt to Strahd is undone so quickly that, say you hit him with a crit and broke his jaw, he would take that hit and simply turn back seemingly untouched. The only way to suppress this is to have either Strahd or the heart in an anti-magic field. So that would take quite a bit of planning to get to the heart first, to put it in an anti-magic field. Like you'd have to have one rogue player go down there and do that and hope they made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When in Castle Ravenloft, he can take lair actions. And let's be honest, Strahd is not fighting you unless he is in the castle. Like he will fuck off and make you come to him. Until initiative count 20 on the next round, Strahd can pass through solid walls, doors, ceilings, and floors as if they aren't there. Strahd targets a number of doors and windows he can see, causing them to either open or close as he wishes. Closed doors can be magically locked. Strahd summons an angry spirit of someone who has died in the castle. The apparition appears next to a hostile creature. Strahd can see and makes an attack and then vanishes. It has the stats of a specter. And Strahd targets one medium or smaller creature that casts a shadow. If the target fails a charisma save, the shadow detaches from them and is now under the control of Strahd. So, looking at his stats, a lot of the abilities and actions here are the same as a vampire stat block we went over in the last episode. So I'm not going to go into full detail of them all. I will just mention the things that are the same and explain anything that is new. He is a medium undead that is lawful evil with a CR of 15, his AC is 16, and he has an average hit points of 144, and his walking speed is 30. His lowest stat is wisdom with a +2, intelligence is a +5, and everything else is a +4. Saving throws are dex, wisdom, and charisma, and his skills are arcana, perception, religion, and stealth. The lowest of these is religion that gets a +10. So he likely isn't failing any of those checks. Damage resistances are necrotic, bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing from a non-magical item. He has dark vision of 120 feet. And his languages are Abyssal, Common, Draconic, Elvish, Giant, and Infernal. He gets all the same abilities of Shape Changer, 3 legendary resistances, Misty Escape, Regeneration, Spider Climb, and Vampire weaknesses as regular vampires. However, what is new is his spellcasting ability. Since he studied magic and became a wizard in his life, he has up to 5th level spells. And I'm just going to real quick run through that list because it's a pretty big one. And a lot of them you'll see overlapped from the magic caster. Yeah. So we have Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, Ray of Frost, Comprehend Languages, Fog Cloud, Sleep, Detect Thoughts, Gust of Wind, Mirror Image, Animate Dead, Fireball, Non-Detection, Blight, Greater Invisibility, Polymorph, Animate Objects, and Scrying. For actions, they are the same as the vampire stats. So you get a multi-attack with only 1 bite, which can be done as a vampire or a bat. Unarmed strike as a vampire, where he can choose to grapple instead. And he has charm and Children of the Night, which is summoning more minions. And finally, he has legendary actions and can either move without provoking an opportunity attack or do an unarmed attack or a bite. So that's it. That's Strahdy.
We did it.
We did it. I'm gonna take a breath now.
All right. Well, as usual, we'll go through. We'll ask some questions. Let's raise some dice and see who gets to chat first. 13.
10.
18.
Ooh, looks like you just get to keep on talking.
I just get to keep on talking.
So in this area, I'd like to think of maybe things that we would do different. Because again, we've all played in Strahd before. So if there's some thoughts and things on how you might do it differently this time or some other cool inspiration thoughts, feel free to share. So as always, we'll start with role-playing. So any kind of other quests or one-shot interactions and any other role-playing tips that you might have for folks, since we've all played it before, that might be a good place to go to.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you ladies what your thoughts on gender flipping Strahd would be. I have a friend, Renee, that has done it, and it was a lot of fun in his campaign. He used a supplement from a Instagram user named Beth the Bard called She is the Ancient. But I think that would be a very fun new way of
You're
playing
basically creating
this.
Queen of the Damned. It's Queen of the
Yeah,
Damned.
yeah.
And I'm all for it. I would fucking love to do a gender bend of Strahd, and even
Yeah.
Cass. Like it would be Casey and Casey and Strahdette.
Yeah.
And Vecna can keep their name.
It's very gender neutral. Vecna.
It is a very gender neutral name. But I think that we could. I'm sorry if you've played in that before.
I have not. I've just, like I said, I have a very good friend Renee that has run it, so I've heard his stories from how his campaign went, and it just sounds like a lot of fun. And like thinking about how you would play Strahd different as a woman, like what the different motivations and how they would think about things differently.
I would have to trust the DM indefinitely in
Yeah.
terms of watching them gender bed Strahd into a female. And like I think this goes back to a lot of the conversations we had in our like women in gaming episode in terms of stereotypes for women and these kinds of things, right? So I think that like there are very few people in this world that I would allow to do something like this and do it right and do it well, right? You being one of them, Peps, I think that you would do it well.
I would still end up marrying Strahd at the end of it, if I'm being honest.
When you like the wine and not the label, it makes it a little bit easier for everybody.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, but no, I think that would be really cool. So, yeah.
And I would suggest, if anybody is looking into that, to look into the supplement that Beth has written, because it was written by a woman. So you do have that, connection there. And I believe it was done pretty, I don't know if accurately is the word, but, with grace.
Yeah. And I think like for my idea to almost, the thought is similar, but when I'm thinking about role-playing tips when it comes to Strahd, it can get a little out of hand really quickly. And I think that's something that was done really well in the last like interactions that we had with Strahd and Cass. And these characters are supposed to be hypersexualized in our existence, mixed in with are supposed to be seductive. I think that something as a DM to remember is there's more than one way to be seductive. So I think that in the last one we did, it was done really well that yes, Strahd wanted both characters on his side, but went about it in two different ways. He played on the fact that my character wanted power and so on and so forth. And then he preyed on the fact that Casey's character wanted more of a human, more of a connection with someone and to see them as human, right? You could tell that like there's a lot of thought put into how each of our characters would get seduced, because if they just rocked up to my character and said nice tits, I'd be like, yeah, okay, die in a fire. And if they walked up to Casey's like character, it was basically just along the lines of like, I can give you all the power in the world. She'd be like, that's nice. I don't really care. Tell me about your dad is what her character. So I think that that's something to remember is yes, these are like, we talk about these campaigns as that they're hypersexualized and like supposed to be seduced and seductive. There's different ways to seduce different characters. And I think that shows a really good DM is their ability to tap into each character and which direction they would get pulled. Right. Yeah. So yeah. What about you, Casey?
And I think playing on that as well, like using the charm ability, and like you can use that in a lot of different ways. And so when you think of charm, it's, you can go down any of those avenues. If you are trying to negotiate with them using like the aspect of power and it's not quite working, you can then use the charm ability for enhancing that and actually forcing it. So it's that I am going to look like this is a negotiation and I'm presenting you with a very desirable thing. If it starts to not work, then he's going to start using the abilities that he has to push it a little further, because that is his angle. He wants to present it. And if he has an angle that benefits based on the person or whatever whether it's power, whether it's being loved, whether it's being like in a position of being having the being the bride or being the groom to some like Ravenloft and living in Ravenloft. If if it's not working, he's going to show his true colors. And so using the charm and forcing the hand as well. So yes, you can play it a few different ways on how to seduce or how to like play the angle that they want. But then if it starts to not work, they're just going to use the charm.
Yeah, like, fuck it, fine.
Yeah.
We could have done this the easy way, but you're going to make me do it the hard way.
Exactly, because he is evil.
Still evil at the end of
So
the day.
you can fall for it or you can be forced into it. One way or another, he's probably going to get what he wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I forced him into it.
You know what? Sometimes strong characters like to be dominated as well. You know what I mean? So.
I do.
All right. The next topic of conversation, obviously, exploration. So this could be anything in terms of environmental interactions, things that, again, we're talking vampires, so think of the classics. Any of the abilities that you find very intriguing and enticing. And then, of course, body horror or existential dread. Peps, you're up first.
Yeah. So I think one of the like best parts of the Curse of Strahd campaign is how many times you interact with him. Like he just pops up randomly. And like when you first meet him that you should not. And that you have to build up to that. But I think you can use that as a DM like pretty much any time that you need like something filled in or some sort of rush put on something, or to make your characters feel like we need to hurry up on this, because there's so much of Barovia and there's so many things you can explore and do and side quests and things like that this campaign could go on forever before you actually like get to the Strahd part. And if they're fucking around too much, like that's a very good way to push the story towards the end.
Yeah, which is why I think it was weird that like in my campaign, that the one campaign that I played actually within Strahd, we didn't interact with him at all.
Yeah,
we were very much interacting with everything else around him, and I think that they did that on purpose because I think my DM was not comfortable dealing with the seduction side of things and kind of like feared away from it. So basically played our story in a completely different like direction, but hard to say. But for me, I think that like when people think of Strahd, they think of everything as like we get that vampire image of how everything is beautiful and pretty. The vampires are sexy, like they're like it's but I would to play on the body horror part and the existential dread is when you're in these towns surrounding, that is where you can get dark, sinister, gory, like mutations of animals, like all this kind of stuff that's happening around the castle is where you want to play that up. So that when you go into the castle or you have those interactions with Strahd, it's almost like that darkness falls away. And then you get that feeling of being charmed and being seduced and you're in a comfortable space. Like when you go into the castle, it's gorgeous. Right? Like it's your classic, like medieval, amazing, beautiful castle in certain areas, obviously. But like you would, if I was being a DM and doing the exploration pieces, you would see that difference. It would almost be like walking through a veil every once in a while. When you're within a certain distance or a certain presence of Strahd, it's almost like you have that feeling of you are somewhere else, quote unquote. So environmentally, that's how I would play on it. So
yeah, and even like that tug of like because the charm is within 30 feet that he can see, so it's even if he's not like using that ability to charm, it's like once you get within 30 feet of him, there's this sense of like something's happening to me, or like I like that.
Your strong, independent woman now just becomes a lady because they're just like, they don't have to be strong and independent anymore for the next 2 hours. Like, you're taking me out of my masculine and putting me in my feminine. Thank you. Like,
just turns everybody into a switch.
And you know what? We love that about it. We love that about a good Strahd king, you know?
I'm feeling things that I haven't experienced. What's happening?
Oh, Atlanta. What about you, Casey? Exploration stuff?
Yeah, again, use the shape changer, and the fun thing about Strahd is he can shape change into the wolf as well as the bat. And so I think that's where you also start mentioning that, like, a swarm of bats, you hear a swarm of bats overhead, or if you're going through like some of the forested areas, or you're walking along the walls, along the edges through Barovia, you hear the yips of wolves, and you catch the eyes of one wolf seemingly staring at you. And over time, maybe some characters might realize that like Strahd is actually following them very closely as you're navigating through. You just don't realize it. And I think that's a fun thing to play around with, just to see if how long it takes characters to figure out that the DM's not just saying, oh, okay, a swarm of bats, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
why
and
do you
wolves
keep talking about it?
wolves are like a very big theme in it also.
Yeah.
So like
there's werewolves and lycanthropes as well, right?
yes,
So-
yeah, I stole wine off of one of their shrines and got cursed.
Ooh.
Missing
Yeah, and
them.
that's where you
Yeah.
can play with like eye color, you know. It's like
Mhm.
first you start seeing yellow eyes, and then, you know, like it could all depict which type of which type of wolf you're dealing
Yeah.
with when you're not actually seeing them clearly in the mists or in the fog. And then you start seeing red eyes consistently, or one of the player characters seemingly always sees red eyes, whereas every other one doesn't see the one with the red eyes. And it's like Strahd's honing in on one specific character of the group.
Yeah.
So kind of playing around with that. It's leading into the dread of like, I don't know what that means. What's happening? We're being stalked.
Yeah. Also a great way to get your Team Edward, Team Jacob off if you want to. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying again, Twilight, bing, twice. There you go. I don't care, okay? Prime age. Anyways. Cool. So last part, of course, we'll talk a little bit more about combat. In terms of Strahd himself. What do you got, Peps?
So when you're going up against Strahd, you're not just going up against Strahd, right? Like this entire land is basically his minions, except for like the few resistance. So he would have like the army of vampire spawn, like any of his past lovers and stuff. It says he turns into vampire spawn, and they would be very loyal to him. Still. So you have to consider as a DM, there are so many levels before you even get to the battle with Strahd. There would be, you know, all of those minions that they would have to go through first. And then it's not just cut and dry your fighting Strahd. You gotta find all the things first, and you gotta you know, we had one of our items was hidden in the castle, so we had to like do the whole song and dance and, you know, try and find that while he wasn't looking, and before we could even defeat him and that kind of stuff. Again, you're not fighting him outside of the castle because he's just gonna fuck off. Even if, you know, you might get a couple hits in, but he's not sticking around for any battle outside of his castle.
No.
So you are going to lean into his lair actions. You are going to lean into anything special he can do there. And he knows his castle. He had it built. It will be warded. It will be guarded. There will be, you know, minions protecting anything that is important to get in there. So it would, if you choose to fight him. It's gonna be a tough fight. I did fight him once in one of my games.
Yeah.
And also you're going to be fighting at least one of your players because he is going to use them against you. So it's not just going to be his minions either. It's going to be one or more of your parties that he is like turned by that point and seduced.
Yeah, in ours we fought him in ours, and it was very much a very like, and it was in a small space. Like we ended up in the tombs, and that's where we fought him, was like right next to his coffin that we were trying to destroy, and he was like, ah! We were like, no. So we fought him in a very small space. So everybody was turning on everybody, and everybody was yelling at everybody, and it was just the most calamitous fight ever. And but it was so much fun though, because like especially if you're playing with the kind of group that like would lean into it and is there for the storyline, it makes it so much easier. Like So if one of our players got turned, like they would lean into it and would become a part of the story or what have you. And like it was, so that was a lot of fun. But like we knew that we were probably not going to win that fight. We were very surprised when we did.
I think we all are.
Yep. It was a very, very long, hard fought battle. And we did have a lot of like magical items that we collected along the way to help us. Like, so we went in stacked in it, but we did try to attempt to do it the same way. Like we were running through the castle, trying to find different ways to like tire him out or weaken him or do other things before we had to fight him. And then we triggered it accidentally by actually finding the tomb when we weren't supposed to find it. And we used the ghosts, Rose and Thorn. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
We turned them to our side and they were with us. And so they were actually flying around the castle doing things for us while we were doing our thing in our area too. So we had ghosts flying around assisting us. So like we did a lot of stuff to make it work. But to your point, if you are in that castle, you have to be in the castle in like 7 different places at once, because you are not just fighting Strahd. You are fighting his castle, his minions, all of the mine shit that's going on, and like you're gonna get lost in that castle 2 or 3 times because again, it's magic, it's warded. You're gonna end up I think we ended up in a couple of different realms at one point. Like it was just chaos, absolute chaos. But it was fun. It was good. It was a great ending to that campaign. So, but
yeah, I think like you saying that sparked my memory of, we did have a player who I believe had to like didn't come to several sessions, so they their character just wandered off and got lost or whatever, and then came back at the very end in the last battle as a spawn.
Nice.
To fight like with Strahd. So if you do have a player who like can't make all the sessions and has to leave, like that's a great way to bring them back into the very end of it, is like surprise.
Yeah. Well, even like we made friends with Rose and Thorn very early on in campaign, and they became attached to us, each one to a different character for different reasons. And Thorn became attached to our paladin, where he taught him how to fight. So every episode we got to level up Thorn and give him more abilities. And like, so we had like 2 extra NPCs that we were actually leveling up that we used, right? I thought that was a good addition to give you a little bit more firing power, is using an undead to fight an undead.
My biggest complaint about Curse of Strahd is that their little brother's name was not Bud.
I'm okay that it wasn't.
I think it's Rose Thorn. It should have been Bud.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
We renamed him. We were like, nope, that's not his name.
I think we should also mention one of the things that he's going to use in combat too is communication, and trying to like he's going to talk to players all the time, potentially, as an option, because he does speak 6 languages. So I think he's going to use that as well as a tactic in combat, in that, yes, he's going to use common when he wants to talk to the group. But if there's a specific like tiefling, he's going to start rambling on in infernal. And if there's like an elf, he's going to spin off and start saying specific things in elvish. And I think there's going to be not only the combat and like the attacks that are going to be happening and the spells that are going to be happening, but then he is also going to play the game of trying to persuade and convince and like build that sense of dread, just in trying to target different players in different ways. So I think that could be fun to play with as well.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, it's like specifically speaks to you in like your mother language or your mother tongue, in terms of your first language kind of thing. Yeah, pull your heartstrings a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, because he does speak a lot of the like just general like what your characters would be, like their races. Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts on Strahdy McDad Strahd.
I just love him.
I know.
What else can I say about my husband? You know,
it probably is easier to marry.
Fair enough.
It is a lot more fun to marry him than to fight him. I've done it both ways. I can say that. Completely knowing. And throw Irina in the fountain, because fuck her.
Fair enough. Into the waters you go, ma'am.
Yeah. That's what we did. We were like, we are so tired of this bitch. And we just shoved her into a fountain. Which turned out good for her, but that was not what we intended.
You did not want good things to happen to
We
you.
did not want good things to happen to her, but
Oh, my Lanta.
So on a scale of 1 to 10 vampiric love slaves,
Oh my God.
how would you rank these creatures as part of the undead landscape in D&D 5th edition? Starting with the vampire spellcaster.
you can see that clearly Adam already knew how my game ended.
100%. But like in terms of like the spellcaster, as written, I don't much care for it. It's just another vampire that can wave its fingers and cast the same spells in my mind that it does naturally with its environmental capabilities. So
Yeah.
if you're not going to be able to change and homebrew that spell list a little bit more, I'm going to give it a solid 5.5. I'm going to add points in now so Adam can be.
I think it adds some flavor to it if you want to homebrew your vampire and not use one of the just already out there made ones. So it can add a little bit to it, I think. I don't remember what we rated regular vampires at back in 2 months ago.
I am sure it will be said.
I think it was pretty high because of the complexity we forgot that they had.
Yeah,
we're all pretty blown away about it. So.
Yeah. But I mean, you can take it or leave it with the spell casting. It's just if you want that, if you have a very high magic game and you want to add some more into it.
So you'd rate them the same as you would a regular vampire?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Casey.
I feel like this variant was listed separately for the sake of if you want to create your own Strahd, but it's not Strahd. Strahd is like surprisingly at the same CR rating as the vampire spellcaster variant at 15, but has has a different spell list, like has more, and then a couple other like add-ons as well. So I would think either like Strahd should have been maybe a point higher in the CR rating than this vampire spellcaster. And I think it was basically, like you said, Megan, added in as an option, but like switch up the spell list to tailor to what matches your story. And it's I guess there to allow players to use that angle, in my opinion. And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say because I would rate vampires like an 8, no, maybe a 9 even. So I'm going to put this one as, no, I'm going to stick with 8. I'm going with 8.
Fair enough.
And so on that, I'm going to, because Strahd is just like a step beside or above the vampire spellcaster. So how do we feel about Strahd in this scale? I'm going to assume, I'm going to make some assumptions, but
1,000 out of 10.
I can't put him above Cass. 9.
Yeah, I'm going to land at 9 as well on that one. He is what he is. And so then we have the vampire warrior variant. What do we think?
See, I would even say that Strahd could be like given some of the vampire warrior traits with the armor and stuff because he was a warrior. He fought in all those wars and stuff. So I would almost increase his AC in that and give him like when you go to battle him, he's going to be like ready and have on that armor.
Yeah.
I like that.
But then you're just making Cass, and then I'm gonna say down Strahd, like this man has a sword for a reason, and you don't need it. This is for my mans only. And then we will have a battle of mans, is what we would have.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I'd watch that.
Me too. I'd be like, get the tire out, 1 foot, go.
I would just have Megan and I in the background eating popcorn, like, okay.
Great, yes, indeed.
I love how Megan, you just keep putting Strahd in his place. It's like, okay, don't go above your station. You will never be cast, though.
Never be cast. I'm so glad that he has small highlight. And this is the sad part is Cass's highlight is actually quite small in the new Vecna book. But it's good enough for me and I'm happy with it. So.
I guess we didn't actually rate the warrior there.
Oh, we didn't. Oh, 6.5. 6.5.
Yeah, I think they're not like as cool as a spellcaster, so just like a little under.
I really liked them better than the spellcaster because
Yeah.
to your point that you brought up when we were talking about them, when you walk up to if you walked up to a robed creature, you would assume magic or vampire.
Mhm.
If you walked into a room with someone wearing full plate armor and holding a sword, you'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, this is just a warrior until you realize they're a vampire. I think that these ones are a little bit more deceptive and neat than just a weird mage that's standing there. That could probably be a vampire because they're not carrying a sword.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
could definitely get in with the more like brute force body horror with the warrior, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm giving it an 8. I'm sticking with 8.
Solid. Solid round number. Yeah.
All right, now it is time to close the casket on this part of our conversation on Undead and D&D 5th edition. If you'd like to discuss what you've heard here today, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and at r/itsAmimic. For more episodes on monsters and other D&D topics, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bring Out Your Undead. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website at www.itsamimic.com, as well as a store and a Patreon. You can check out the show notes for more details. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. Cloud. There we go. But it's been a while. It's been a hot minute. I don't think we've recorded in over a month now at this point. Like,
I feel life got real busy for all of us all at once.
It always does in the summer. And like, yeah, it just.
We're like, okay, I know I wrote these notes like over a month ago. Had to reread them.
Yeah, I was just rereading them when I jumped back in.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
And
these
it's
are oldies.
I have 3 full pages of notes for this episode alone.
Well, because we're talking about your husband, so obviously.
Right.
All right. Well, before we get too far off topic, what I'm going to do is, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Hold on here. Let me go back up to the top of the episode. How about that? There we go. That's it. We're going to have an arena battle of the husbands. Yeah. So, Casey, oops, is your vampiric husband? Because we need to add another one in.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you can choose Vecna if you want. Like, it's cool with me.
You can choose Lich.
Yeah, like going with Accra and the situation we currently are in, where there is that battle going on. I think they're going to end up falling in love. They're not, but that's what I want to happen. Is they end up like realizing that they're meant to be powerful together. So I would say, I would pick Vecna.
Not to give Adam ideas, but how dope, sorry, like this has nothing to do with the podcast. How dope would it be if we went into fight like Accra, Vecna and Accra had that moment of, wait, we could be more powerful together, let's just be together. And then Cora rocks up and just stabs Vecna through the heart and then destroys Vecna. And Cora's like, and that would be the ultimate Cora being like, you cannot have that much power.
Like, I'm calling it here.
Yeah. That's it. My foot is down. No more husbands for you.
Orgy.